Is that the appropriation be agreed to? Ms Lauder.
Book on for hours, so you'll be pleased to know I'll be trying to keep my comments relatively brief. We've spoken in this place many times about the fact that good governance requires good consultation with the community, and I've pointed out that the government has been lacking in this regard. And the budget seems to have materialised through very little consultation, and I'll make a few specific examples of that, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, when the government came out and announced an increase of 300% to the lease variation charge on units without consulting the property industry and without consulting the building industry, is an example of the contempt with which the government holds major stakeholders and the taxpayer, the ratepayer in general. To blindside the Master Builders Association, the Property Council, the real estate sector, as well as the general population, shows these changes are just an exorbitant tax grab, one that would not have been supported by industry. Madam Deputy Speaker, the big new tax increase of the LVC proves that this ACT Labor government is talk and no action. There's silence from them about how this will affect the property industry. Young people will be worse off because of this. The big new tax on new units. It'll be a big new tax on first home buyers, a big new tax on downsizers, and those who want to age in their own home and perhaps have a dual occupancy on their block. And we have the situation where many Canberrans are being locked out of the housing market as it is. And now the government acted in this budget to increase the lease variation charge for each new unit by 300%. This change encourages people to build and retain. It doesn't encourage people to build and sell or build and move. It doesn't encourage more land being put to market. Instead, it encourages the building of McMansions, to quote my Assembly colleague, Ms Lakuta. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government didn't consult with the community, and this was quite clear on the Community Day in the Estimates Committee hearing. They didn't bother speaking with those on the ground, those in the know, those who will see and understand how these changes will impact on the sector. So to illustrate the point, Madam Deputy Speaker, prior to this budget, a dual occupancy built on Schedule 1 land would have incurred a lease variation charge of $7,500. In the last 6 years, this has seen 1,368 dwellings being developed. Meanwhile, a dual occupancy built on Schedule 2 land incurs a lease variation charge of around $35,000, give or take. In the last 5 years, 244 dwellings have been built on Schedule 2 land. It's clear to see from this, Madam Deputy Speaker, that by increasing the LVC, development will be far less viable. Despite this, the government decided to create a dual occupancy LVC of $60,000 in this example. We've already seen the number of rushed development applications that were put in since the budget announcement from developers trying to beat the increase because they knew if they didn't beat the increase, their developments would no longer be financially viable. Too often we see policy on the run like this. The government have had to backtrack on this change already, making conditional arrangements for the next 6 months and a review in 18 months. Had they done their job from the start, Madam Deputy Speaker, they wouldn't have had to backtrack. Good policy happens when the government consults. We've said this over and over, Madam Deputy Speaker. Another example of a much smaller scale was what I like to call Fishing Gate. It was an item in the budget that I think the government hoped no one would ever notice. It was an announcement of the closure of the southern gate entrance to Googong Dam, and after the announcement in the budget, which the government hoped no one would notice, they realised that such a change might affect the people of Canberra after all, and at the beginning of the month they backtracked once again. It was in the Queanbeyan Age of the 3rd of August, saying the government had backed down on this particular issue. This attempted closure of one of the gates again showed it's a government that doesn't consult. It doesn't take the time to understand how the changes they make to the budget might not seem like much, but will actually have an impact on people's lives. And they prove the government doesn't care and is out of touch with the average person. Madam Deputy Speaker, before finishing off, I'd just like to mention a few specific recommendations from the estimates report that I'm very keen for the government to take careful note of. For example, recommendation 89, that the ACT government takes steps to ensure that closed development applications are accessible online. In that way, Madam Deputy Speaker, people can see what's happening on their streets. A lot of people don't look at the development signs. They want to know what's going on once construction starts. And by making these closed DAs available online after work has started, after the approval has been granted, it gives people the opportunity to be informed at any stage. And I think it was a good suggestion of one of my colleagues, I'm afraid I don't recall who, but a good suggestion. I doubt that very much. But it was a good suggestion, and I'm keen to see that implemented. In recommendation 94, the ACT government continued to keep the Dickson community informed on the progress of consultation and planning for Section 72 Dickson. And I feel this is very important, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the light of other controversial changes the government snuck through as a technical amendment to allow social housing on CFZ land. So it's understandable that Dickson residents are concerned about how little the government may consult and communicate with them on the use of this community land. In recommendations 91, 92 and 93, the government's decision to discontinue the indicators around master plans. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are still master plans that haven't been finalised. The Woden Master Plan, at the time of the estimates report and the estimates hearings, the draft Tharwa Village Plan. There's a few too many drafts there. But there will be no more accountability indicators reported on in the future. The government wants to stop reporting on the completion and publication of master plans, despite the fact that as at the start of this financial year, some had not been completed. And just finally on heritage, in the past few months as Shadow Minister for Heritage, I've learnt a lot about heritage sites in our city, from Indigenous sites to Federation homesteads, and more recently about heritage trains. The other thing I've noticed over the past few months is the lack of concern the government seems to demonstrate for Canberra's heritage and for the people who work in this space. The government has made considerable changes to the Heritage Act without consultation. I know that, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I consulted with many organisations in the space about proposed changes, and they said they hadn't been consulted. Remember the example that it's taken 15 years to finally make a heritage assessment on Oaks Estate, and government has never communicated the reasons for such a lengthy delay. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I looked in the budget, I wasn't surprised to see that the budget lacks any real accountability indicators in the heritage area. No indicators that provided any real clarity about the number of nominations received, assessed, or the time taken to assess them. I hope the government will listen to the Estimates Committee recommendation number 95 to implement such indicators. And recommendation number 95 said, the committee recommends that the ACT government include more accountability indicators for heritage matters in future budgets, so as to provide a greater level of clarity about the number of nominations received, assessed, and the length of time taken to assess them. I've enjoyed meeting many people who work in the heritage area over the past few months, from the National Trust to academics at our universities. We're fortunate to have so much talent in this area. It's a shame, however, that one of the complaints I hear the most is that the government doesn't engage with them and give consideration to their views. The government feel like they have the knowledge and expertise in heritage, not those who work in the field and deal with heritage issues on the ground. Hopefully this coming year is the opportunity for the government to turn this around. I hope the government will take on board the recommendations by the Estimates Committee in recommendation number 96 to engage with heritage stakeholders. And that number 96 recommendation
The member's
says...
time has expired.
Another 10 minutes, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is the proposed expenditure be agreed to. Ms Lauder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Recommendation 96. The committee recommends that the ACT Government engage more with the ACT heritage stakeholders and give consideration to their input into heritage decisions. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd just like to say this is a budget that takes away certainty and ignores the wishes of the community. The budget will have a negative effect on many in our community: first home buyers, downsizers, mountain bike riders, anglers, those who live near developments, those who are developing, those living near CFZ land, communities still waiting for master plans to be completed, heritage stakeholders, and even, Madam Deputy Speaker, people being relocated from public housing along the Northbourne Avenue corridor. I hesitate to mark them out separately because, to me, they are just members of our community and they will be disadvantaged just as much as anyone else in our community. They are us and we are them. Madam Deputy Speaker, each of these groups that have been negatively impacted would have been better off if the government went out and sought more advice from stakeholders. There's no need for so many groups to be negatively impacted. It's an example here in the budget of the arrogance of the government. Madam Deputy Speaker, I started off today saying that good governance requires good consultation with the community, and I do hope that this government will take that on board.
The question